October 3rd, 2025. Port Everglades, Florida, U.S. Intelligence has traced the shadow of the Black Gun Network, a criminal empire, hiding inside America's own supply chain. Beneath the cranes and dock lights, that network moved over 2,500 rifle kits, 12 million rounds of ammunition, and nearly $200 million in laundered cash through Florida ports. Firepower enough to arm a small nation. Every container stamped marine equipment was in truth a shipment of death bound for the southern border and the cartels waiting beyond it. This is not petty smuggling. It is an industrial scale trafficking operation that replenishes cartel armies month after month. In Texas, now 300 federal agents and Navy SEALs are mobilized. Their mission: crush the network before dawn or watch it spread beyond control. Will this operation succeed in dismantling the criminal machine before it metastasizes into something even worse? Or will the Black Gun Network reach farther across borders and into other nations? Join me as we uncover the truth. October 3rd, 2025, 4:20 a.m., Port Everglades, Broward County, Florida. The port wakes in. Whispers, cranes creak, horn blasts drift across dark water in a line of steel containers sits under sodium. Lights like sleeping beasts. In a nondescript warehouse off the service road, men clock in as if they run a legitimate marine fittings business. They do not. This is the factory floor where parts become instruments of death. For months, investigators have tracked a pattern that looks ordinary on paper but lethal in practice. Inside each sealed container are roughly 2,500 component kits, barrels, bolt carriers, triggers, and serialized looking parts. One container yields enough parts to assemble 1,200 combat rifles in a single week. Multiply that by 3 containers. Move per week, and the math becomes brutal. 3,600 rifles a week, 15,600 a month, over 180,000 weapons a year that can flood streets and battlefields. The network calls itself the Garrison Shield Network, a bland name that masks violence. Corporate invoices list marine hardware. Bank transfers show round numbers wired to shell companies. Behind the paperwork, cash drops whisper in hotel rooms. Investigators traced at least $180 million per quarter through a web of accounts, enough to finance dozens of smuggling runs, fuel caches, and payoffs to compromised officials. From the key, a routine manifest points to a second act. Containers sail under legitimate flags. Rendezvous with small freighters 60 nautical miles offshore, then transfer to unregistered skiffs, 7 skiffs per convoy that slip into coastal coves at night. From those coves, the cargo moves overland, dirt roads, hidden trailers, then south across bridges into Tamaulipas and cartel veins. This was no spontaneous crime. This was industrialized arms trafficking, designed, audited, and scalable. Port Everglades was the key point. Production, concealment, transportation, transfer. Cut the key point and you paralyze the whole machine. Investigators stared at the manifest and asked quietly with the same cold certainty they carried into every operation. How many lives would be changed if the next 3 containers arrived? From October 7th till October 9th, 2025, 2 days of silence, glowing screens, and sleepless analysts. Across the Gulf of Mexico, faint digital pulses told a story no one was supposed to hear. From Miami to Laredo, a joint task force of 300 agents, FBI, ICE, and naval intelligence pieced together a network so vast it blurred the line between business and war. Each clue was small. A wire transfer here, a radar echo there. But by dawn on October 9th, the pattern became undeniable. 48 suspicious maritime transfers in 6 months. 12 cargo ships repeatedly shutting off their AIS trackers for exactly 42 minutes each time. Every blackout coincided with a ghost pickup, a smaller vessel appearing minutes later and heading toward the Texas coast. The data team calculated that a single convoy could move 3,600 rifle kits, enough to arm an entire cartel battalion. Every week, the money trail was even worse. IC traced 912 wire transfers through 34 shell companies stretching from Florida and Panama to Bice near the Mexican border. More than 180 million flowed every quarter, laundered through casinos, freight firms, and cryptocurrency wallets. One flag account recorded $12.7 million in withdrawals over just 28 days, almost identical to the estimated street value of the smuggled weapons. At 2:47 a.m. on October 9th, a satellite captured the thermal signatures of 7 unregistered skiffs leaving a freighter 60 nautical miles offshore. At the same moment, FBI, field agents in Loro intercepted radio, chatter-coded phrases for cargo ready, and transfer agreeing. Within minutes, the pieces locked into place. What had begun as numbers on screens had become a kill chain. The pipeline was active, fast, profitable, and protected. Commanders studied the data, exchanged one look, and sent a single encrypted word through the network. Execute. The silence of surveillance was over. The storm was about to begin. Can the U.S. crush the Black Gun Network before it multiplies? Or is this just the beginning? Share your view in the comments. 5:30 a.m. Northern Far, Texas. The word execute flashed across encrypted screens, and within seconds, the quiet dawn turned violent. Engines roared, rotors thundered, boots hit the mud. In the heavy, humid air, 300 federal agents, Navy SEALs, and HSI operatives advanced toward the compound that had once been untouchable. What followed was not a raid. It was a full-scale assault. At 5:33, the first breach team cut through the perimeter fence. Muzzle flashes erupted from the warehouse windows, tracing orange lines through the fog. Within 30 seconds, 3 armored trucks burst from the back lot, mounted gunmen firing blindly. The SEALs answered with precision. 2 at 4 rockets slammed into the lead vehicle, scattering flaming debris across the yard. The third truck veered off the road, its engine torn apart by .050 caliber round from a hovering Blackhawk. Inside the compound, chaos exploded. 70 cartel gunmen fought back with AK-47s, PKMS, and grenade launchers. The noise was deafening. Over 7,800 rounds fired in 15 minutes. Tracer fire cutting through the fog like red lightning. One SEAL squad breached the East Warehouse, uncovering 1,200 rifles, 90,000 rounds of ammunition, and crates stamped with the insignia of a Mexican cartels. Another unit stormed the control building, finding $4.6 million in cash, encrypted ledgers, and manifests detailing 3 upcoming convoys bound for the border. At 5:47, the battle reached its climax. 2 Apache gunships swooped low there, cannons roaring. 240 rounds of 30 millimeters. Fire shredded the last resistance. Towers crumbled, fuel drums ignited, and explosions rolled through the valley. The flames consumed the yard, painting the sky orange as operators moved through the wreckage, securing prisoners and clearing bunkers. By 6:10 a.m., it was over. 29 cartel gunmen lay dead, 38 captured alive, and dozens more fled into the brush. The ground was littered with wreckage, burning trucks, shattered crates, and rifles stacked in heaps. The combined seizure stunned even the commanders. 2,400 completed rifles, 1,800 unfinished kits, and $6.5 million in laundered cash recovered. Over the radio, the SEAL commander's voice broke through the static. Objective Alpha secure. The convoy routes were severed, the storage yard destroyed, and the network's spine broken. But as the smoke drifted east over the Rio Grande one, truth lingered among the commanders. This battle had severed one artery. The beast, though wounded, was far from dead. Stay with us. If you think the firefight was intense, wait until you see how deep the money trail goes. October 11th, 2025, Miami, San Antonio, in Mexico City. The smoke from far had barely cleared when the second phase began. Intelligence recovered from the burned-out yard. 2 encrypted drives and a stack of ledgers unlocked what investigators called the hidden spine of the Black Gun Network. Behind every bullet was a banker. Behind every rifle, a corporate front. The battlefield shifted from dirt and fire to data and finance. And the new offensive would hit harder than bullets ever could. At 7 a.m., on October 11th, HSI's Financial Crimes Division launched Operation Iron Ledger. 34 shell companies across Florida, the Bahamas, and Bice were simultaneously raided. Teams entered office towers in Miami's Bickle District, cutting power in, seizing servers before any data could be wiped. What they found was staggering. $62 million in frozen assets, 280 accounts linked to weapon shipments, and transfer logs showing $740 million laundered over 18 months. One firm alone had processed payments equivalent to arming an entire battalion every 10 days. In San Antonio, another front erupted. A TF tactical agent stormed a safe house belonging to a logistics broker tied to the network's Florida branch. Inside were 5 unregistered trucks, each fitted with false floors, hiding crates of AR components, suppressors, and conversion switches. Over 5,000 weapon kits ready for export. A brief firefight broke out when 3 guards opened fire from the second story. The exchange lasted less than 3 minutes, but left 6 suspects down, 1 ATF officer wounded, and the building engulfed in smoke after a munitions cache ignited. Meanwhile, In Mexico City, coordination between DEA liaison and local intelligence triggered a string of arrests. 11 cartel intermediaries captured in safe houses. 7 vehicles loaded with smuggled rifles intercepted. On Route 85, financial tracing confirmed their link to the Florida accounts. Seized days earlier. By October 12th, the full picture emerged. The Black Gun Network wasn't a side operation. It was an industrial supply chain worth over $1.22 billion, moving weapons faster than governments could regulate them. Every spreadsheet, every seized drive, every arrest cut another tendon from the beast. As the final warrants were served, the task force stood over stacks of confiscated hardware and frozen ledgers. They hadn't just raided a smuggling ring. They had crippled a transnational industry. Yet even in victory, the silence felt temporary. The numbers spoke too loudly to ignore. If this much firepower could hide in plain sight, what else was still moving in the shadows? By October 12th, the dust had settled, but the magnitude of the operation was only beginning to register. In a high-security press room in Washington, D.C., federal agencies stood united. ATF, HSI, DOJ, and Navy. Command presented a single front. Operation Iron Chain, the most extensive multi-agency interdiction in over a decade. The numbers were unprecedented. Over 5,000 fully assembled firearms recovered, 12,000 kits seized, $245 million in frozen assets, and 41 high-value suspects detained across 3 countries. But beyond statistics, the strategic impact reverberated southward. Within 2 weeks, cartel-linked violence dropped 28% in 6 known hot zones along the U.S.-Mexico border. Tamaulipas reported its lowest homicide count in 8 months. In border towns like Hidalgo and Far, locals described a rare calm. One resident interviewed by a federal liaison said, "For the first time in years, my children slept through the night." Forensic accounting continued to unspool deeper ties. Analysts confirmed that a portion of the Garrison Shield Network's funds were routed through a previously unknown political action group with campaign contributions made to multiple state-level officials. Investigations are ongoing. Meanwhile, in Fort Lauderdale, agents cataloged the last of the evidence. Crates now sat in rows under tarps at a secure facility, row upon row of weapons that never reached the street, a silent testimony to months of surveillance, code breaking, and cross-border cooperation. Human voices also emerged from the aftermath. Veterans groups praised the operation for preventing further bloodshed. Families affected by gun violence sent letters of support. One former Marine, whose brother had been killed by cartel crossfire in Novelito, wrote, "This wasn't just a bust, it was justice." But no one in the task force claimed victory lightly. Every success left a vacuum. Intelligence now suggested remnants of the network were regrouping, fragments of infrastructure spreading across Central America, seeking new proxies, new currencies, new digital blind spots. The battle had been won, the system disrupted, but the architecture of trafficking, like any resilient enemy, was learning, adapting. This wasn't an ending. It was a fracture point, and the next phase would not be fought with boots or bullets, but with vigilance, persistence, and a resolve to keep the chain broken. The operation was over, but the echoes lingered. From the charred ruins of the Far Yard to the sealed hangars of Fort Lauderdale, every piece of steel now sat behind caution tape, a silent reminder of how close the border had come to drowning in weapons. What began as scattered data points had become a war waged across land, sea, and servers. And for the first time in years, that war had ended in America's favor. In total, more than 17,000 firearms, millions of rounds of ammunition, and over $250 million in laundered assets were removed from the hands of killers. Analysts called it the single largest disruption of the illicit arms economy in the Western Hemisphere. But for the men and women who lived it, victory was measured differently. In the silence, after gunfire, in the children crossing, schoolyards without fear in the border, towns where night finally fell quiet. Yet even as the press celebrated and the politicians claimed success, those inside the task force knew the truth. Corruption and profit never sleep. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another network was already forming. Another ship was loading. Another banker was counting. The lesson was simple and brutal. Vigilance cannot end where victory begins. Still, this mission, Operation Iron Ledger, proved something powerful. That coordination, persistence, and courage could break even $1 billion empire built on deceit. That when America's agents, sailors, and soldiers moved together with purpose, no wall of secrecy can stand. So, as the last convoy of armored vans rolled away under the Florida sunrise, the story of the Black Gun Network closed with one final truth. Justice may move slowly, but when it strikes, it leaves nothing standing. If you believe these battles matter against corruption, against violence, against the darkness itself, then share this story, like, subscribe, and help us keep the light on. The next Frontline.